An officer in the Ukrainian army told me a strange, haunting story about an encounter, an event from which, by all conventional logic, no one should have survived. His paratrooper unit in 2015 fell into a devastating ambush by Russian reconnaissance troops. The initial situation was completely unfavorable, a deadly trap from which tactically there was no escape route. According to him, the only possible outcome was death for all the soldiers under his command. Yet the inexplicable lay precisely in their survival and the horrific fate of the Russian soldiers in that ambush. This event, especially in the context of what is currently happening in Ukraine, deserves to be recounted sooner rather than later. This story is truly too baffling, making it difficult for me even to title it, leaving me only to wonder what happened in Ukraine. He began communicating via radio, transmitting the coordinates of the tree line where the enemy was hidden to the nearest artillery base. But before he could finish transmitting the information, their BTR was hit by another rocket. This time it wasn't a direct hit, it struck the front right wheel. The vehicle's hull wasn't penetrated, but the vehicle caught fire violently. Everything within a 200-foot radius to the right side of the vehicle was engulfed in flames. This madness could be attributed to the battle, the harsh jungle terrain, heat stroke, or hallucinations. But when the story was told to the native Congolese people, they were not surprised at all. The Congolese believed the story held a terrifying degree of truth. They suggested the Belgian military must have trespassed on sacred lands. These sacred lands belonged to a fearsome predator, the Jeba Fofi. The Jeba Fofi is also known as the Congo giant spider. It has an appearance similar to a tarantula, but far exceeds the size and horror of any known spider species. Reported leg spans range from 3 to 6 feet. These spiders are said to possess speed, strength, and potent venom. They are believed to live in hidden lairs made of webs and leaves. There was no other option. Staying inside meant certain death. They scrambled out of the vehicle, the process happening so fast that Cap doesn't remember the specific details. He was almost blinded by the heat and flames, his face suffering second and third degree burns. Leaving the burning BTR, they sought cover in the trees on the left side of the road. They could only hope reinforcements would arrive in time before the enemy overran their position. The Jeba Fofi are legendary hunters. Their diet includes small mammals, birds, and according to legend, humans who cross their paths. Today, the spider is believed to be rarely seen due to habitat loss and a decline in available prey. It is still rumored to lurk in the deepest unexplored regions of the vast Congo rainforests. Only rumors and local folklore serve as evidence for the existence of the Jeba Fofi. Documented military records from the Force Publique during the Congo Free State era are difficult to find. This makes verifying the story of Lieutenant Remy Jansen's ill-fated patrol nearly impossible. Like any fantastic tale, this story has likely been altered and embellished over time. Research into Remy Jansen's story often leads to a version set in Vietnam 80 years later, rather than the Congo in the 1890s. This Vietnamese version is historically nonsensical. And then the strange thing happened. In just an instant, everything suddenly stopped. The gunfire ceased. All sounds of battle vanished. At first they thought reinforcements had finally arrived, but in just a moment, they realized that wasn't right. The reinforcements were still very far away. None of them truly knew what happened next. A complete silence fell. Known history does not record Belgian troops being deployed to Vietnam. There are no reports from any forces during the Vietnam War of encountering Belgian troops or slave-trading gangs. Given that Belgian forces were engaged against Arab slave traders in the Congo in the early 1890s, the story likely originated there. If the story did indeed come from a Belgian officer, it most likely emerged in the Congo Free State during King Leopold II's occupation. After more than 120 years, it is not surprising that the story has become elaborate through retellings. It can be assumed that the size of the spiders may have grown with each retelling. A consistent part of the story is the persistent belief in and fear of the Jeba Fofi among the Congolese people, particularly the Baka communities. These people live not far from the forest where the spiders are said to reside. They continue to survive by hunting and gathering and explore these forests daily. Stories of giant arthropods have long existed in Congolese oral history and legends. Then, as quickly as it had arrived, the silence was gone. Instead, there were new sounds, frantic screaming and chaotic gunfire echoing from the opposite tree line where the Russian troops were hiding. They lay still under their camouflage, waiting for bullets to again embed themselves in the trees around them. But the strange thing was that the enemy no longer seemed to be firing in their direction. They were completely confused, not understanding what was happening. 10 seconds later, the screaming and gunfire abruptly ceased. An absolute, almost surreal silence returned. Based on the sounds they had just heard, the only conclusion they could draw at that moment was the Russian soldiers had been attacked. And certainly it wasn't their reinforcements. The creature was first brought to global light in 2001 by Scottish explorer and cryptozoologist Bill Gibbons. Gibbons explored the Congo River basin in an attempt to shed light on the Jaba Fofi legend. He met many local people willing to share their knowledge through historical accounts and personal anecdotes. Another notable story, set in neighboring Uganda in the early 1890s, has a strangely close time and location to Remy Jansen's story. This story concerns an English missionary named Arthur Sims. Arthur Sims was on his way to a village on the shore of Lake Nassala with 2 porters. The 3 of them found themselves having to cut their way through a dense forest. They suddenly became entangled in a mess of spider webs strung between trees and the forest floor. While struggling to free themselves, all 3 were attacked. Arthur Sims described the attackers as 2 very large spiders with leg spans of at least 4 feet. After another 15 minutes of silence, the actual reinforcements arrived. It was the entire 2nd Company of the 79th Air Assault Brigade, along with 3 T-64 tanks and 4 ambulances. When they arrived, they met no resistance from the enemy's position. Everything remained in an eerie stillness. The initial thought of the reinforcements and the survivors alike was perhaps the enemy had retreated. But that didn't explain the sudden silence and the horrific sounds just heard. The feeling of confusion and fear from the inexplicable silence seemed to add to the horror for the survivors. These creatures pounced on his 2 porters. They plunged their fangs into the helpless men who were still caught in the unusually tough webs. As the porters struggled and screamed, Arthur Sims managed to reach for his pistol. He fired wildly at the spiders. The gunfire forced the 2 creatures to abandon their prey and retreat, but the damage had been done to the porters. Devastated by the spiders' venomous fangs, the 2 porters quickly succumbed to swelling and fever. A horrified Arthur Sims was left alone. It was days later that the now distraught missionary reached his destination village. He told the villagers about the horror he had witnessed deep in the forest. They found the Russian soldiers still in their fighting positions in the trees on the right side of the road. There were 8 of them in total. All were dead. The area was a literal bloodbath. 8 bodies, an entire standard Russian SRG team had perished. It is important to note they had perished but not under Ukrainian platoon fire. To outsiders, his story was likely just the ravings of a madman. But to the villagers, his story was entirely credible, perhaps even like an everyday occurrence. Bill Gibbons first learned of a giant spider through Miss Margaret Lloyd. Miss Margaret Lloyd was formerly of Rhodesia and was living in England. Her parents, Reginald and Margaret Lloyd, were exploring the Belgian Congo interior in 1938. They spotted something crossing the jungle road ahead. Initially, they thought it was a large cat or a monkey walking on all 4s. They stopped their vehicle, an old Ford truck, to let the creature pass. They were stunned to see it was a very large brown spider similar to a tarantula. The spider's leg span was at least 4 to 5 feet. Some Ukrainian teams searched the area, others examined the bodies. The purpose was to find documents and intelligence, and most importantly, to determine what had killed them. The preliminary examination results on the bodies were truly shocking. Each one had at least 5 fatal gunshot wounds. Based on the positions of the bodies and weapons, only one conclusion could be drawn, however unbelievable and incomprehensible they had shot each other. Mr. Lloyd was trembling too much with excitement to get his camera. Mrs. Lloyd was so shocked that she just wanted to return home to Rhodesia immediately. This creature is called the Jaba Fofi. Jaba means large or giant. Fofi means spider. All types of spiders are called Fofi. Bill Gibbons reflected on the story that prompted his trip to the Congo, heard from an African immigrant in England. Stories of giant man-eating spiders are often considered material for mythical films. It is strange that encounters similar to what Sims, the Lloyds, and Jansen described are not uncommon. For some reason, many of these stories seem to emerge during wartime. This event, according to Cap, has no official record. 2015 was hell on earth, so they didn't bother. 8 enemies were dead, so that's 8 more enemies dead, simple as that. 6 years later, Cap still has large red scars on his face from the burns. They are starting to fade thanks to the care of doctors at the Central Military Hospital in Kiev. But those scars are a constant reminder. He cannot stop wondering what could have caused 8 professional, cold-blooded, well-trained soldiers to suddenly turn on and kill each other. Especially when they were in the middle of a firefight where they clearly had the upper hand. Just 1 year after the Lloyds encounter, 1938 World War II broke out. Tens of thousands of civilized people were sent to the front lines, many in remote and unexplored regions. Allied soldiers slogging through the jungle islands of the Pacific seemed to face both Japanese soldiers and 8-legged creatures. These creatures made soldiers question whether they had died and woken up in hell. A story was brought to light in 2005 on the radio show Coast to Coast AM, featuring cryptozoologist Rob Morphy. A caller named Craig shared a wartime story from his grandfather, an Army veteran in Papua New Guinea during World War II. For many young American soldiers from North American climates, the jungles of the Pacific Theater were like alien worlds due to the strange fauna. Papua New Guinea was no exception. Papua New Guinea is an island nation not lacking in strange animal sightings. Papua New Guinea is one of the largest islands in the world. I replied to Cap's first email, trying to delve deeper into his speculations. He provided the following explanation. He understood that the ending of this story was baffling, and they themselves couldn't find an answer. There was no logical explanation, at least none that he could find. The survivors from his platoon and the brigade command did their best to clarify what had happened. The scene examination found no other footprints or shell casings except for those of the dead SRG soldiers. They had been there alone without any external intervention. Its lush forests remain largely unexplored even today. American soldiers defending Port Moresby in World War II were likely the first to venture deep into the jungle interior on patrol. Craig's grandfather was one of these soldiers. While clearing thick brush with his machete, the American soldier was frozen with fear. He had nearly walked straight into the web of a giant emerald green spider. His immediate reaction was to hack the spider to pieces with his machete. Craig himself found the story hard to believe. However, Craig insisted his grandfather never lied. His grandfather was still alive when Craig shared the story and provided convincing details. Accepting such a large arthropod as real is baffling. They recovered a military-grade handheld device from the body of the commander. The device contained detailed ambush plans, including retreat routes and extraction plans. This completely contradicted their actions. They were winning in complete control of the situation. Ukrainian reinforcements were miles away. The Russians had more than enough 10-15 minutes to annihilate Cap's platoon and disappear. They faced no slight threat of capture. They also weren't short on ammunition. The amount recovered was enough to hold off the Ukrainians all day. They even had 2 unused bumblebees. Papua New Guinea is a land seemingly forgotten by time, with pristine forests and undiscovered species. War brought humans deep inside it, disturbing the previously peaceful environment. Papua New Guinea shares its largest island with Indonesia. The world previously scoffed at the idea of strange, oversized creatures in this island region. 100 years ago, scientists laughed at the idea of giant, man-eating lizards in the area. Most recorded lizard species in Europe and the Americas were harmless and small. In 1910, Dutch military officer Lieutenant Stein van Hans Broek explored the area Indonesia was a European colony. He heard tales of 20-foot-long land crocodiles. He returned with a dead 6-foot-long lizard and reported seeing others up to 10 feet long. 16 years later, explorer W. Douglas Burton traveled to the island to study these creatures. The narrator, for safety reasons, asked me not to reveal his identity or any other names when I recount this story. Therefore, I will only refer to him by the nickname his comrades commonly used, Cap. He confirmed he served in the 79th Air Assault Brigade of the Ukrainian Air Assault Forces at the time in 2015. The 79th Brigade is a renowned unit, having participated in countless battles and peacekeeping operations since 2014, always demonstrating tenacious resistance and an indomitable spirit. Cap's current status is not being disclosed a necessary measure to ensure operational security. Based on their equipment and weapon markings, it was highly likely this was a reconnaissance platoon from the Pskov Airborne Division. Cap described them as true professionals, well-trained, extremely well-equipped, and cold-blooded. Russian soldiers are trained in guerrilla tactics and quick strikes and retreats. They are known to commit suicide in desperate situations. However, the common method of suicide is using a hand grenade, not shooting each other with AK rifles, and certainly not doing that in a 100% winning situation. Burton returned to New York City with 2 live specimens. He named them Komodo dragons and put them on display at the Bronx Zoo. This discovery fueled a century of Western imagination about giant, undiscovered animals on faraway islands, including dinosaurs. Army veteran and filmmaker Marion C. Cooper was inspired by seeing the Komodo dragons at the zoo. This inspiration led him to write the 1933 classic King Kong. Stories of giant spiders may be similarly embellished, just as the Komodo was initially reported as 20 feet long, but was actually half that size. Proof of any new creature requires evidence. We await a brave explorer to capture one of these monsters and bring it to a zoo. Craig's grandfather was not the only American soldier to report seeing a giant spider in Papua New Guinea. This is fortunate for giant spider enthusiasts, but unfortunate for the soldiers. The only logical explanation they could think of was a direct order from high command. But that was hard to believe. Hard to believe that Russian commanding officers were raving lunatics willing to waste elite personnel for no reason in a winning situation. Nothing prevented those 8 soldiers from withdrawing from the area. Nothing prevented them from annihilating the Ukrainian soldiers before reinforcements arrived. Instead, they did the inexplicable thing. High command was also involved. The number of fatal wounds on each body indicated a violent close-quarters internal frenzy, not a structured suicide pact. Australian troops also fought in the remote Owen Stanley Range of New Guinea throughout 1942 and 1943. Their mission was to root out Japanese forces. These Australian soldiers also emerged from the jungle with terrifying stories. Australian cryptozoologists Debbie and Peter Hines recounted a story from a friend's father, a World War II veteran. The veteran referred to as Jackson lamented an encounter with a terrifyingly large spider. The encounter occurred during an armed patrol along the Kokoda Track, a 60-mile trail. Jackson stopped to relieve himself in the brush. He noticed large webs clinging to trees and bushes. Jackson was accustomed to large spiders back home, but was not fazed just by the webs. He noticed an unusual creature watching him from beneath the brush just a few feet away. The High Command also considered the possibility that this was part of psychological warfare, some kind of show of force, a terrifying message. But this conclusion also led nowhere. No one could explain what exactly they were trying to demonstrate. The spider was completely motionless. Its inky black body, not including legs, was the size of a small dog. Its legs were short, thick, and hairy like a tarantula's. This description is similar to the description of the giant spiders in the Congo, Africa, at the same latitude. Jackson stared at the spider in an awkward position. He acted slowly, deliberately, never taking his eyes off the creature. Step by step, he put distance between himself and the spider. Eventually, he made it back to the relative safety of the Kokoda Track. Oral accounts of giant insects were reportedly common among Allied troops in the Pacific. Few, if any, of these accounts seem to have made it into official records. Cap's soldiers later called the event the Hand of God or the work of a guardian angel. Some of them became true believers after that night. As for Cap, he wasn't a believer in such things, still trying his best to stay sober and rational. The saying, where there's smoke, there's fire, or where there's a web, there's a spider, is very fitting. With the end of World War II, a power vacuum in Vietnam led to another conflict as communist forces sought to take the South. In the 1960s, a new generation of American men found themselves in largely untouched jungles. Like their World War II predecessors, they returned home with wild stories. A story was shared online by Mr. Maxima on behalf of his father-in-law, a Vietnam veteran. His father-in-law and his 5-man team spent months at a time scouting in the jungle. They encountered these creatures multiple times. Mr. Maxima stated his father-in-law never lied and rarely spoke of the war, seeing it as a waste of life. The veteran swore that he had seen spiders with bodies the size of a standard dinner plate. Including the legs, the total leg span ranged from 20 to 30 inches. Cap's final conclusion about the fate of the SRG team after years of reflection was, The entire area of their position looked like a bloodbath. They had shot each other using automatic fire. Who would do that to their own comrades? He believed that all 8 SRG soldiers were psychologically triggered simultaneously. They simply snapped a nerve, some kind of psychological programming. But the question still haunted him. Why did it happen in a winning situation? He had no answer. He knew all of this was crazy. The brutality and the method automatic fire indicated this was not a planned suicide or psychological display, but a sudden catastrophic mental collapse. He saw more than one, always near streams or water sources. These spiders terrified the entire unit. They shot a few with their M16 rifles, emptying entire magazines. Despite taking multiple hits, the spiders kept moving. The contributor added that where there is a will, life will always find a way. Living creatures known and unknown exist in every environment. Humans have only found about 25% of the total species on the planet. It is possible that some spider species have evolved in different ways. The speaker accepted his father-in-law's word as truth. Stories from Allied soldiers in World War II are difficult to verify. Connecting to reality, Cap feared that Ukraine today might face even crazier things. About 150,000 Russian troops were concentrated along the Ukrainian border. War could break out in full within weeks, even days. However, the idea of large, undiscovered spiders in the jungles of Asia and the Pacific seems less far-fetched as reports emerge globally. Similar reports of large spiders also exist in the Central and South American rainforests near the equator. New discoveries are constantly being made, like the Komodo dragon. The giant huntsman spider was first seen by humans in 2001. It was found in a remote cave system in Laos. It has a 12-inch leg span. This size is significantly smaller than the 20 to 30-inch monsters reported by American soldiers. This reinforces the idea that stories can be embellished over time. The Goliath bird eater is a documented spider species that lives in the South American rainforests. It is not as large as the giant huntsman, but its name implies its diet. U.S. officials, including Secretary Blinken along with British, U.S., and Canadian military advisors, were frequent visitors helping Ukraine prepare its defense. The Ukrainian armed forces were now better trained, better equipped, and ready to fight. Cap still hoped his soldiers would never have to face a large-scale war against the regular Russian army again. Giant spiders are not limited to jungle climates. Imagine a soldier deployed to Iraq outside their normal habitat encountering a large spider. This hypothetical spider was described as large enough to eat a house cat. In the early 21st century, the United States was once again engaged in an overseas conflict in Iraq. The environment was the scorching heat of Iraq, replacing the tropical setting of Asia. An enemy familiar with the Iraqi desert made a lasting impression on soldiers and service members. This enemy was the camel spider. Camel spiders are about 6 inches long. They are equipped with a menacing set of fangs and an aggressive attitude. They look like a cross between a crab spider and a scorpion. And then the news reports flooded in confirming the fears. Russian troops were moving into Ukraine. Explosions echoed in many cities. The Russian army attacked from the south, north, and east. Military targets across Ukraine were attacked, but there were also reports of hits on some civilian towns. They are capable of sending even seasoned soldiers into a panic. Their aggression is such that they are said to chase fleeing soldiers. The camel spider's fearsome reputation is likely unwarranted. Their bite is painful but not venomous. Despite their reputation for an aggressive posture, they only do so when cornered or threatened. To soldiers who saw one rapidly approaching them, the spider likely meant no harm. Camel spiders seek shade to escape the desert's intense heat. This shade can include the shadow of a human. What appeared to be an aggressive spider chasing someone was likely just seeking shade in their shadow. The next story is not about a camel spider. A missile struck an apartment building, killing at least 2 people. Russia had launched a military attack on Ukraine, targeting sites across the country. All men of fighting age and reservists, ordinary citizens were arming themselves to defend their country. Initial reports indicated dozens of soldiers had been killed. This was the largest invasion of a neighboring country in Europe since World War II. The people called this the People's War. Gunfire echoed to control crowds. People jostled to board trains in a mass evacuation. It comes from an Army veteran deployed to Iraq in 2009. The Army veteran personally reached out via email several years ago. He wanted to share a story about a giant spider he had seen in Iraq. The size and aggression of that spider would make a camel spider seem much more lovable and approachable by comparison. The veteran named Bill was in Iraq in 2009. He was stationed at Forward Operating Base FOB Brassfield Moyers. The base was very small, about the size of 4 football fields. The Army was closing smaller FOBs and moving personnel to larger bases, so Bill was only there for 2 or 3 months. The area where their CHU's containerized housing units were located looked like a roofless hangar with 7 to 8 foot tall brick walls. The CHUs looked like small office trailers and were lined up along 2 sides of the area, 10 to 15 units per side. On the Russian side, war supporters said one people, one fatherland is all for one. But those against the war felt ashamed to be Russian, believing they would go to hell, hoping the Ukrainians would forgive them someday. Wooden sheds used as offices were located in the middle, about 4 of them. Only red lights were used at night on this base. A few cats were regular visitors to the area. One night, Bill and 3 others were walking back from the chow hall. They entered the platoon CHU area. As they walked along the right side between the CHUs and the wooden sheds, they saw a cat that was terrified first, standing up, hissing and acting strange. They looked to see what the cat was focused on. The CHUs were elevated 2 to 3 feet off the ground by bricks. At first, they just saw something that looked like 2-foot-long, 1.5-inch wide stakes sticking up at a 45-degree angle from under the edge of the CHU. Then they realized these were not stakes but legs. The setting for this event was in 2015, about 9 kilometers, about 5.6 miles southeast of the town of Ilovaisk, Donetsk region, Ukraine. It was part of the protracted war against Russian aggression. The year 2015 was specifically described by Cap as hell on earth for all Ukrainian servicemen. He held the rank of lieutenant, serving as a platoon commander. The mission assigned to the platoon was to secure a medical evacuation medevac operation. The rendezvous point was one of their artillery positions near Ilovaisk. There were reports of Russian troops seemingly deliberately targeting a civilian vehicle driven by an elderly person. NATO responded by increasing the deployment of US and allied troops in Latvia to protect the alliance. Concerns about civilian infrastructure, hospitals, and other facilities that they hoped would not be targeted. Ukraine's message of resistance echoed famous worldwide. "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition." The determination of the Ukrainians. "I am here. We will not lay down our weapons. This is our land, our country, our children, and we will defend it." The creature looked exactly like a wolf spider. Its body, not including legs, was the size of a 2-liter soda bottle. Bill swore he was not exaggerating the size. He confirmed it was not a camel spider, which is smaller, tarantula size, and looks different, a cross between a scorpion and a spider. This spider was completely black and looked like a wolf spider. They were about 6 feet away from it. The spider shot out incredibly fast. It grabbed the cat, fought it, and killed it. Almost immediately, it ran off with the cat back under the CHU. The entire event took place within 20 seconds or less. Initially, the people were afraid, truly afraid, but now they are ready to fight. Examples of civilian resistance are appearing everywhere. Ordinary citizens standing up, a group of unarmed men blocking tanks chanting, "No one wants war." The motivation for resistance is to protect family, protect the country. On the other side of the CHU was a brick wall. They could not see the other side without walking around the CHUs. The spider must have climbed over this wall. After regaining their composure, they searched for the spider around the area but did not find it. A few days later, near the burn pit, they found what was left of the cat. Only bone, skin, and fur remained, no meat. The spider was never seen again. Bill was still glad they saw the cat first and did not walk past the spider. When they rotated out, they were all happy to leave that base. To this day, Bill still has nightmares about giant spiders. Russian public opinion is also divided. Some support President Putin, many others do not. A Russian woman with a clearly anti-Putin stance asked, "Do you know people in Ukraine?" Then continued, "Yes, I'm actually in love with that," referring to Ukrainians. Clearly, Vladimir Putin is losing this propaganda war. He never expected to encounter something like that in Iraq. He felt lucky that others were with him who saw it, so they were not considered crazy. From a scientific standpoint, it is argued that it is very difficult for any spider species to grow to the enormous sizes mentioned in these stories. The primary scientific argument is based on how spiders breathe. Current oxygen levels and gravity are believed to limit the maximum size of arthropods. This implies that giant spiders, if they existed millions of years ago, would be limited in size in the present day. Many undiscovered animals have challenged current scientific understanding when they were found. New species will likely continue to be found in the near future. The speaker personally hopes giant spiders are not among those future discoveries. The speaker has bad memories of encounters with medium-sized spiders in the jungles of Southeast Asia. The initial mindset of some Russian soldiers was to think they would be welcomed as liberators. The reality was much more brutal. There is a story about a Russian soldier who was killed only managing to call out before dying. Mama, mama. The reality is, Ukraine, a real war is happening here. The fear for the future is palpable. I'm scared. The scale of the bombardment is horrific. We are shelling all the city. The speaker asks the audience for their best or worst spider story. Welcome to the intro and outro. The speaker mentioned having his own spider stories. There are too many to share, but the worst experience was in Guam. The speaker was with the 31st MEU. Recon teams leave the ship for a few days for port visits. A training mission was planned before the port visit. They were flown off of the ship by helicopter, flying several miles over the ocean, and landed in Guam at night. They were going in with another unit that was doing an operation. They jumped into Humvees, which was unusual because they were typically dropped directly into the jungle. Russian soldiers were told they would be welcomed. But the reality is that Ukrainians are resisting fiercely. They lie down under armored vehicles, throw themselves onto the wheels to block the advance. The Russian side in turn calls the Ukrainians fascists. The cry of pain from a young Russian soldier. Mama, this is too hard. Just moments later, he was killed. The Ukrainian defiance regarding Kyiv. When do you expect Russian troops in the center of Kyiv? Never. Today, Russia is losing this war. After getting out of the Humvees with a few teams, they stopped and did an SLLS, stop, look, listen, smell. It was very dark that night, likely due to no moon and canopy cover. The darkness was evident as soon as they stepped out. The speaker's team, radio recon, went one way, and amphibious recon team went another. They lost 2 guys who followed the wrong team when they saw them leave. They realized they were missing 2 guys after doing a head count. The missing guys were the tail-end Charlie or Arto radio operator. These 2 guys had followed the wrong team. They had to make radio contact to locate the missing guys. They had to link up and find each other again to get the 2 guys back. Cap ended his story with me by thanking me for sharing it. After linking up, they continued on their way. It was so dark that night vision goggles were almost useless. Everything was too close, making depth perception very poor. There wasn't enough ambient light to use the night vision goggles effectively. The nature of the patrol was to walk around a series of trees that were very close together. The brush was very flat, avoiding hills. Eventually, they lined up just a few feet apart, moving in a caterpillar or serpentine formation. It was so dark that the Arto, who was described as a goofball no one liked, kept asking where everyone was. In response, the others told him to be quiet. The speaker confirmed they were very close together, only about 10 feet apart. May God bless us all, my friend. The speaker was in the lead position of the patrol. His role was to find the easiest path, avoiding brush and hazards. The others followed behind in a serpentine formation like a snake. Being in the lead meant constantly running into vegetation. All the vegetation in this jungle was sharp and thorny. The speaker was terrified at the thought of getting his eyes poked out. The other major challenge was spider webs. Every 2 or 3 feet, the speaker walked face first into another spider web. Spiders crawled up his sleeves, across his neck, and across his ears. He was constantly swatting spiders and trying to brush them off his uniform. Cap confessed that he was not a writer and apologized for his English ability. He wondered how many spider webs were in this jungle. The inky blackness prevented him from seeing and avoiding the webs. It seemed all the spiders were building their webs at face level. He also walked through webs with his chest and legs, but his face was the only skin that constantly hit webs. He felt like he was taking the brunt of the patrol, clearing the webs for everyone else. He felt like he was the spider magnet for the patrol. Eventually, the speaker was so fed up that he dropped his rifle. It was hanging on its sling. He decided he was no longer being tactical and prioritized dealing with the spider webs. He picked up a 2-foot-long stick. He started spinning the stick in front of him as he walked through the jungle. He just wanted his story to be at least understandable. And he walked around the trees, checking his GPS and trying not to get his eyes poked out while still spinning the stick. He imagined he looked like a wizard casting a spell, trying to wrap all the spider webs onto the stick. Towards the end of the patrol, the sun started to come up. He looked at the ugly stick he was holding. It looked like white cotton candy on a stick with spiders trapped inside their own webs. It was a grotesque-looking cotton candy stick about an inch thick with spider webs. He threw the stick away. As they continued to move, they started to look around the rest of the jungle. They saw spiders everywhere. But I must say Cap's English was not poor at all, it was even excellent. It was probably fortunate that it was pitch black before, because seeing the reality of the jungle might have prevented them from continuing the patrol. The speaker mentioned that he would try to find and share a photo of the Guam jungle. He took photos with his camera back then. The spiders were not just large orb weavers with wide webs and individual spiders. They had massive web complexes. The speaker felt it was like the New York City of spiders, with spider apartment complexes. The Guam jungle was full of small spiders, medium-sized spiders, and giant spiders. It was a hellhole of a jungle. Research shows that Guam has a problem with spider outbreaks. This problem seems to be caused by humans bringing in spiders and other non-native species. The initial mission went quite smoothly. After they reached the designated location, the medics performed an extraordinary job saving the lives of many soldiers with extremely limited resources. After completion, they began their journey back to the city of Mariupol, about 100 kilometers, about 60 miles to the southwest. They were transporting 2 severely wounded privates to the local hospital. I didn't have to make many edits, just a few minor punctuation and grammar errors. The speaker found the experience to be pure hell. He cannot imagine encountering truly giant spiders like in the other stories. The spiders in Guam were bad enough. He has been uncomfortable moving through that jungle at night ever since. He commented that Guam is a great place, but he does not like walking in its jungles. A message to viewers who might be locals. Back in Okinawa, the speaker got a fever and had a terrible dream. In the dream, he was in a large tree, and giant spiders were coming out of holes in the tree. A spider bit his leg in the dream. This bite actually hurt because in reality, he kicked his leg against the concrete wall next to his rack in his barracks while flailing. He slammed all 5 toes into the wall and woke up clutching his foot in pain. I have done my best to convey this story so that it has the impact that the horrific experiences described deserve. These spider encounters left a lasting impression on his memory. He understands that encountering a giant spider in real life would be very traumatic. The Guam experience was the worst he personally ever had. Welcome back to the smoke pit, where we peel back the darkest corners of the military experience. Outside of the intense work hours when the weapons are racked unless they need to be scrubbed, spotless free time in the barracks often passes with strangely mundane activities. From playing video games, watching anime, reading books, to finding oblivion and alcohol. But there is another activity less talked about that harbors immeasurable danger, attempting to talk to the dead. Amazingly, the practice of seances or communicating with the other side in the barracks became a pastime for some service members during their free time. Not limited to the Marine Corps, similar stories also come from the Army and Navy. And frankly, for those familiar with the sometimes reckless audacity of Marines, their dabbling in such forbidden things seems less surprising anymore. Once again, thank you, Cap, for giving me the opportunity to share this story. The most common tool for this dangerous game, the infamous Ouija board. For those who have never seen one, it is a wooden board printed with letters, numbers, and short answers like yes, no, goodbye. The mechanism of operation from a skeptical point of view is quite simple, or at least appears to be. Multiple people place their hands on a small wooden piece called a planchette. They claim that no one is moving it. It is possible that one person in the group is secretly manipulating it with their best poker face, or it could be tacit agreement with everyone contributing a little force, convincing themselves and others that some spirit is controlling the planchette. It all relies on suspending disbelief and accepting a supernatural possibility. But what if that supernatural possibility is real? Finally reflecting on the mystery and safety. This is the chilling premise for the stories we are about to explore. What happens when the planchette continues to move on its own even after the game is supposedly over? And what happens when other unexplainable phenomena begin to plague the barracks afterward? What makes these accounts particularly terrifying is their authenticity. The Marines who shared these stories were utterly sincere in their claims that these events actually happened to them. Remember barracks? Life is already challenging enough. A cramped environment lacking privacy, and now add to that the horror of uninvited guests from another realm. The purpose of today's The Smoke Pit episode, and the true stories of Marine Ouija board experiences I've gathered, is a stark warning. It's a warning to all service members about inviting unseen entities into their living spaces. Never underestimate the power and danger of things that lie beyond our understanding. Setting up Aura is simple, taking just a few minutes. I'm not sure if the hand of God truly intervened to save their lives that day. And for an affordable price, you get all the protective features. Aura's monitoring system is always on, constantly checking your information. This provides peace of mind that your family's information is safe. As a result, you can focus on work on other important things in life. Your own and your family's privacy is priceless. That's why I encourage you to visit aura.com Wartime right now for a 2-week free trial. The link is in the description below. You have nothing to lose by trying, and so much to protect. Unlike some other things in life that we should avoid at all costs. Like Ouija boards, for instance. And that's where we dive into the stories. If so, I pray he will continue to protect them. The first story takes us to Camp Lejeune, specifically the barracks of the Marine Corps Engineer School located in the Courthouse Bay area. I want to give a shout out to Ian H., who emailed me after hearing about this incident from another Paranormal Scholars video. I'm not sure if I should use Ian's full last name, so I'll just use the initial for now. This incident occurred around mid-November 2013. At the time, I was in Hawaii attending Corporal's course. According to Ian, a few Marines stationed in those barracks started messing around with a Ouija board. It began with curiosity, but things quickly escalated. Strange things started happening throughout the barracks. People began to panic. Stay safe out there. Reports were made. The chaplain was called in. And eventually the commanding officer had to get involved. The incident was serious enough that it didn't just remain hearsay. It was bad enough to warrant an official documented response. That's when a standing order prohibiting Ouija boards was issued. This order was signed by the unit's then commanding officer, Colonel Jeffrey Johnson. It was drafted in proper standard naval letter format, an official document. And it wasn't just a verbal reminder, it was legally distributed to the entire unit. Even more remarkably, it was posted right on the barracks doors. The contrast between the inexplicable horror, the deadly silence of the 2015 ambush, and the overt, chaotic violence of the 2022 invasion further highlights the unique nature of the event from years ago. The content of the standing order issued on November 18, 2013 was clear. Subject: Marine Corps Engineer School Standing Order on Ouija Boards. Paragraph 1 prohibits the use of Ouija boards, also known by other names such as spirit boards or talking boards, in or on Marine Corps Engineer School spaces, buildings, or property. End. Paragraph 2 states the reason for the prohibition. Their use creates mystery and fear within the ranks, being considered contrary to good order and discipline. Paragraph 3 warns of the consequences. Anyone violating it will be subject to administrative action. Paragraph 4 provides contact information, etc. And finally, the signature J.J. Johnson. Getting the exact details of what prompted this prohibition is quite difficult. Much of the online information about the incident was scrubbed afterward. An anecdote from the current conflict. The reason could be that the commander wanted to remove the post to avoid unwanted attention. However, nearly a decade later, on January 2, 2022, a direct participant in the incident provided more details. This person followed up on a previous post that had been removed and shared his story. He identified himself as the Marine who got the Ouija board banned from Courthouse Bay. His account, which didn't shy away from details, painted a terrifying picture. He and his roommates had been messing with the Ouija board continuously for 3 days. The board seemed to have a particular liking for his roommate. The planchette would point to this friend when he was in the room, even when he wasn't touching the board. Initially, the board answered questions quite normally, but then things took a turn for the worse. A driver mocked Russian soldiers who were stuck because they ran out of fuel. The board became aggressive. It started moving in figure eights, counting backward. In a moment of panic, this Marine broke the board in half. At first, the others thought it was a joke. But immediately after the board was destroyed, things started to get much worse. He mused that perhaps he had done the wrong thing to end the communication. This implies a chilling truth. Even ending a Ouija session can have a right or wrong way, and doing it wrong can open a door to uncontrollable horrors. After the board was broken in half, things not only didn't stop, but got worse. That Marine's roommate started having intense nightmares. He woke up with large bruises on his body. The ambush occurred just 2 minutes after they began their return journey. They were driving on a stretch of road with dense trees on both sides. The enemy, later identified as a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group SRG, ambushed them. They positioned themselves hidden within the trees on the right side of the road. As the platoon's vehicles passed the ambush position, they opened fire simultaneously. He drove up, pulled over, and offered to tow them back to Russia. And most terrifyingly, scratches appeared on his back, witnessed by the other roommate himself. He even developed an infection in his leg, a series of strange events following one another. The Marine described what happened to his friend as straight out of a TV show, just not as violent. And as for himself, he recounted being attacked in his sleep by a large, misty or smoky figure. Of course, we could offer another explanation. Perhaps it was just sleep paralysis. But what happened afterward is difficult to explain scientifically. After he and his roommates moved out, another Marine, a young kid according to the account, became possessed. This possessed Marine was reportedly thrown around his room. This incident was reported to the chaplain. In the late 19th century, the Congo region came under the influence of the Belgian government. And somehow it was discovered that the source was the previous use of the Ouija board. This possession incident was apparently serious enough to get the attention of the commanding colonel himself. Indeed, such events would certainly get a commanding officer's attention. Colonel Jeffrey Johnson, who signed the prohibition, retired from the military the following year. His last unit was the engineer school. I wonder, was this incident something he will never forget in his career? Would he recount this story, or would he prefer to bury it forever? I do not know Colonel Johnson personally, but I try to imagine what was going through his mind when he wrote that letter. I'm guessing there were plenty of standard expletives, and the question, what the hell is wrong with these young Marines these days? This nation was given the ironic name of the Congo Free State, but in reality it was the personal property of King Leopold II. However, based on the accolades from his retirement ceremony, it's clear that Colonel Johnson had a significant impact on the Marines he served with, including those under his command. I have great respect for his 24 years of service, including deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I can't help but wonder if this Ouija board incident played any role in his decision to retire, as he retired just 8 months after the incident. Information from the Paranormal Scholar channel, as Ian pointed out, also mentioned this story in a compilation of Ouija board incidents. They stated the original source was a post on rallypoint.com, written by a Marine corporal involved in the incident. It's possible this corporal was the Marine who took the photo of the prohibition order posted on the barracks door. The host of that channel is Laura. I tried to find the rallypoint.com post again, but was unsuccessful. I'm guessing that post might have contained even more details. Laura also mentioned other strange phenomena she found in her research, things that terrified other Marines in the barracks, and eventually brought the incident to light. Leopold's true motive was exploitation, not humanitarian aid or economic opportunity, as he claimed. For example, doors opening by themselves and slamming shut. Voices and sounds with no clear source. Particularly chilling were the screams of little girls echoing from the nearby woods. Laura even said that a permanent sitting post was established at this engineer barracks. The purpose was to guard the barracks from intruders, both tangible and intangible. However, as someone familiar with the military environment, I'm a bit skeptical about this detail. I'm guessing Laura might have confused this with the standard 24-hour fire watch, a mandatory regulation in every Marine barracks. I find it hard to imagine a rational commander like Colonel Johnson seriously ordering Marines to patrol and yell, "Identify yourself at spirits!" Even so, I must admit, as stories in previous episodes have shown, Marines and soldiers have documented strange occurrences in logbooks while on barracks guard duty. I wonder what kind of punishment did the Marines who messed with the board end up getting? Leopold claimed sovereignty over most of the Congo River Basin in 1885. Perhaps an annoyed staff sergeant made them pull extra weeks of duty with the sarcastic instruction, "Go full Scooby-Doo, keep an eye out for those ghosts you summoned." If anyone was at Camp Lejeune at that time and remembers anything else, please let me know. It's remarkable how this story keeps coming back, constantly appearing in inquiries about strange military events. And that leads us to the next story. Before we dive into that, let's try to imagine the military reaction to breaking a Ouija board. Alright, who's the comedian? Then someone gets the bright idea to put the broken board on the gunny's desk. You can hear the roar of a typical gunny. Who the hell did this step forward now? You think this is a joke? I'll strip the rank off the first one who steps up to fight me. This area contained a large amount of valuable natural resources within its forests: ivory, palm oil, and rubber. Nobody's claiming it. Fine, I'll page 11 the whole damn lot of you. Standing here in a torrential downpour, and not one of you will fess up on set. That's the kind of pressure only Marines understand. This second story comes from an army base. I found it online while searching for more details about the Camp Lejeune incident. The writer didn't provide many specifics about when or where. But if true, it is certainly extraordinary. The setting is a U.S. Army base. However, the participants in the story are Marines. Their unit was a separate detachment stationed with the Army. This makes me curious about which base it was. Could it have been Fort Leonard Wood? I know there are other Army bases that also have Marine detachments stationed there. The Congo Free State was not an official Belgian colony, thus lacking European labor protections and regulations. According to the account, one night their gunny caught a Marine using a Ouija board. In an attempt to get rid of the damn thing, the gunny threw it in the trash right in front of everyone during formation. But then the board reappeared for the first time. The next morning, the gunny went into his office. The office was locked. The door had a code that only the gunny knew. And he found the damn thing sitting squarely on his desk. The gunny's reaction after the first reappearance. He called another formation. He roared, demanding to know who had snuck into his office. Under Leopold's personal jurisdiction, the Congolese people were forced to work often at gunpoint on plantations. No one confessed. He threatened to page 11 everyone standing in the pouring rain. In a second attempt to destroy it, the gunny threw the board into a barrel and burned it. The writer described it as burned to a crisp, ashes, nothing left. But then the board reappeared for the second time. The next day, the gunny went into his office and again found that exact same board on his desk. By this point, the gunny lost his mind, went completely insane. In a third attempt to stop it, things escalated to extremes. He called a priest. The priest blessed a chest. The Force Publique was a paramilitary force established to enforce Leopold's will and protect his assets. The gunny put the board in the chest, chained it up, and put 7 padlocks on it. Finally, it was stored in the basement of the administrative building behind an old armory door. The incident was serious enough that the gunny called the base's commanding general to have a stern talk with the Marines, and the consequence for the Marines stationed there. Their remaining time there was a living hell because of that board. The story participant stated that since that ridiculous thing happened, he has never seen or touched a Ouija board again. This story reminds me of my time in the Marine Corps, my primary job. Their ranks consisted of mercenaries from across Africa under the command of European officers, looking for lost gear, spending all day doing inventory, opening boxes, making sure everything was inside, closing boxes, putting them on shelves, then repeating the process later. When going to the field, the frequency and intensity increased tenfold. The ridiculously simple task opening boxes and counting gear as soon as you arrived. Compared to the absurdity and frustration of constant inventory, a board that keeps reappearing despite all attempts to destroy it sounds eerily familiar in the military environment. And God forbid if you used the gear you had to count it again when turning it back into the unit. Plenty of time was wasted just looking for lost gear. I remember one time having to drive across the entire island just to retrieve a radio with a serial number that had fallen out of a Humvee. Cap's platoon had 2 BTR-80 armored personnel carriers. These are 8-wheeled amphibious armored vehicles. Cap described them as old rusty junk from the Soviet era, although still operational. They were attacked by heavy machine gun fire, 12.7mm, about 50 caliber. The strange thing was that the enemy did not fire a single shot at the medevac vehicle carrying the wounded. They concentrated their entire horrific firepower on the escort vehicles, which were CAP's 2 BTRs. Immediately, CAP ordered the medevac vehicle to continue moving to escape the dangerous area. They maintained control through absolute brutality. Rifles, PECs, ACOG sights, encryption devices, DAGR, GPS units. The list of easily lost items goes on. And to find them, you had to walk for hours throughout the training areas, often in the dark. The consequences of losing gear: a mountain of paperwork. And someone would get chewed out, yelled at terribly. Thinking back, maybe the solution to this problem is simple and a bit dark: tie a Ouija board to every piece of gear. The result? You'd never have to worry about losing gear again. Just check the gunny's desk the next morning and there it would be. Getting back to the army base incident, I seriously speculate that someone might have been deliberately replacing the board every day to make the gunny's life miserable. The Force Publique was mobilized to repel Arab slave traders who had established bases in the region in the early 1890s. It's part of the unwritten rule in the military: shit rolls downhill. Which means, if the gunny was miserable, everyone below him would be miserable too. Now let's move on to the third story, which took place at Camp Pendleton Naval Hospital. The audio clip you just heard was a conversation during a Ouija session. Is someone moving it? Shh, the instructions say not to talk much. What is the spirit's name? J.R. Jr. I think we should go bad idea. There's PMO military police. This conflict lasted from 1892 to 1894. We're leaving right now. You're such a chicken. Wait, ask a few more questions about this guy first. Are you a good spirit or a bad spirit? B, A, D. I think we should go. PMO must have seen us. Get the candle, get the board. The source of this third story comes from the book Tales from the Grid Square, Volume 1. The author is Nick, who has also published Volume 2 and is on Instagram. Numerous armed patrols were dispatched into the deep jungle to destroy the Arab camps and end the slave trade. This story was submitted to Nick by a young Marine stationed in California. The time was one night in October 2018. The location: Camp Pendleton. The participants: the Marine who submitted the story and his friends. The Ouija board. One of his friends had just bought it. And their moral decision: go to the old abandoned naval hospital to talk to ghosts. They were fully aware that this was not the smartest idea in the world. Upon arriving at the hospital, on one such mission, a Belgian patrol failed to return. They parked in the Wounded Warriors Clinic area to avoid attention from PMO or others. Initially, the old naval hospital was locked up tight. The initial reaction of the Marine, the narrator: ready to give up, he admitted to being the biggest chicken in the group. But then a mysterious entry point appeared. They found a door open to the boiler room. He claimed to have checked the entire exterior twice, and that door was not open until they were about to leave. Inside was pitch black. The boiler room had 2 sections. An entry space before the boilers. This patrol vanished mysteriously, in a space behind the boilers. Upon entering, they closed the door behind them. They chose the space behind the boilers to conduct the Ouija session. Supplies brought flashlights, a candle, and the Ouija board. Beginning the Ouija session. Initially, things were normal. They tried to stay quiet to listen for potential approaching PMO. Then they started getting down to business, asking questions. Right from the start, they made contact with a spirit named Junior, who had died there, and other details. The key point, the terrifying turning point: no one saw or heard anything from this well-equipped company of soldiers for days. They asked Junior if he was a good or bad spirit. The planchette slowly moved to spell out B-A-D. Simultaneously, they heard the door they had just closed slam open. And immediately after that, they heard footsteps entering the room. This combination of the spirit's answer and the physical intrusion created a sense of extreme tension, a threat coming from both worlds. Immediately after this door slammed open, the Marine narrator said he thought, "Great busted." He and his group rushed out to the entry area to meet the police they anticipated. But the chilling truth was there was no one and nothing there. The door they had securely closed upon entering was now standing wide open. Speaking of the Camp Pendleton Naval Hospital, This undoubtedly caused concern among the senior officers of the Force Publique. Camp Pendleton is one of the places I was stationed. I saw that old naval hospital building many times while driving to the Wounded Warriors Clinic. But I never went inside myself. The history of this hospital is quite long. The new hospital opened in 2014, replacing the older building. The older building was originally built in 1974, and the 1974 building replaced the original structure from 1943. The reason for replacement: it had become dilapidated, needed repairs, and the 1970s building did not meet earthquake regulations. An old, abandoned place with such a history, I think it's a very likely location to harbor spirits. Eventually, 2 soldiers from the company emerged from the deep jungle, much to the surprise of their commanders. I suddenly remembered a story from my younger brother. My brother works in a university hospital, specifically in the pediatric hospice section. One day he unexpectedly asked me, "Luke, do you believe in ghosts?" I had heard many stories, and I told him that such things are even mentioned in the Bible, suggesting there is something behind these things. After that, my brother told me things he had seen or heard from other nurses. Junior, I think we should go. Bad idea. There's PMO military police? We're leaving right now. You're such a chicken. These 2 survivors were severely dehydrated and clearly driven to the brink of madness by fear. Hold on, ask a few more questions about this guy first. Junior, are you a good spirit or a bad spirit? B-A-D. I think we should go. PMO must have seen us. Get the candle, get the board. The source of this 4th story is a comment on a previous video. The commenter's username: Tom Felton's Perky Nips. I'm a Harry Potter fan, but I'm not sure I'm that kind of Tom Felton who played Malfoy fan. Cap ordered the ambulance vehicle to speed away and immediately contacted brigade headquarters requesting urgent reinforcements. Perhaps the Russian commander had lost patience, deciding not to waste any more time. He deployed a deadly weapon the Russians call the Bumblebee. Although called a flamethrower, this is actually a thermobaric weapon. It fires a rocket carrying extremely flammable fuel. Upon reaching the target, the fuel is dispersed into an aerosol cloud. Immediately afterward, the warhead's fuse ignites, burning the entire fuel cloud. The result is a destructive explosion, creating a powerful shockwave and a massive fireball. Against armored vehicles, its effect is horrific, as the aerosol can penetrate the smallest gaps, allowing the fireball to expand inside the vehicle compartment. The survivors included a young African mercenary and a Belgian officer named Remy Jansen. However, this username is proof that the story was posted by a real Marine. The participant in the story is the commenter himself, a Marine. The time period was about a decade ago, the early 2010s. The location was the barracks at Camp Pendleton. The activity: a few friends decided to mess around with a Ouija board for fun. The context of the time: smartphones were common. The participants were around 19 years old, and there wasn't much to do in the barracks on weekends, no cars, no girlfriends, etc. The 2 men were interrogated by their superiors. This provides understandable context for why young Marines might seek such unusual forms of entertainment. This Marine who submitted the story was a practicing Wiccan at the time. His friends invited him to join, but he firmly refused. During the Ouija session, he decided to sit and watch. He didn't do much other than play his Xbox 360. Miss that thing, he wrote. And I agree. Yeah, man, I miss playing the Xbox too. The Ouija session had 4 Marines participating whom the narrator called idiots. They recounted a horrifying and unbelievable story. The time was 3:33 a.m., a number often significant in paranormal lore. The only light came from a candle pentagram, AF, presumably as f***. The narrator sat on his rack observing. Initially, he tried to stifle his laughter at the ridiculous sight 4 19-year-old Marines sitting around a Ouija board. After 30 minutes of trying, they made contact with an entity. The entity's name was something Indian like Bazoo or similar. At first, the narrator suspected the ringleader was faking it, leading everyone on. He had to stifle his laughter again. They talked to the entity for a short time. The entity claimed to dislike one of the guys in the group. The commanding officers might have assumed they had fled battle or murdered their comrades to cover up desertion. Let's call the disliked Marine Corporal Alpha. The turning point and the strange occurrences began here. The narrator still chuckling internally at the absurdity suggested everyone should go to sleep. And it was at this exact moment that strange things started happening. Strange occurrence number 1. The motion sensor lights in the closet turned on. There were 2 lights in the closet in the room, both turned on at the same time. The closet door was closed. Nothing was moving to trigger the sensors. And this had never happened before. Notably, during the conversation with the entity via the Ouija board, it had said that it was residing in the room's closet. This story is still recounted today, possibly originating from an actual military report. Strange occurrence number 2, Corporal Alpha's shirt was pulled. It was pulled off his body as if someone had grabbed it. His body was actually pulled forward several inches. The group's reaction frozen. And Corporal Alpha, he screamed at the top of his lungs, understandably, and bolted out into the hallway. Notably, he had a broken foot, but he moved faster than the narrator had ever seen him move. The narrator immediately followed Corporal Alpha. He observed Corporal Alpha's head and scalp, high and tight haircut scalp, clearly visible. The unbelievable nature of the story may have convinced the officers that it was too outlandish to be fabricated. And the strangest thing was found when he caught up. It was 3 very shallow but very fresh and red parallel scratches. The location of the scratches running from the top of his head down the middle of his back. Seeing that terrified the narrator more than anything else. The outcome for the participants, they no longer wanted to mess with the Ouija board. And the broader impact, more people started talking about strange occurrences in the barracks over the next few years. The narrator offered that he had more stories if I wanted to hear them. Short summary. TL Dear Marines played with a Ouija board, weird stuff happened. According to the survivors, something far more terrifying than enemy soldiers lurked deep within the forest. I would love to hear his other stories. Send me the other stories you have, I'd love to read them. Thinking about the Wiccan religion in the military. I've seen many dog tags, but never saw Wiccan listed as the religion. I remember at one point I had Jedi printed on my dog tags. I figured someone would get a laugh if I died. This brings to mind a previous episode, the Night Duty at Fort Campbell episode. I mentioned the character Robert. He told a story about encountering a soldier who said he was a druid. That soldier was arrested for running naked under the moonlight. He said it was because he was a druid. I'm guessing he probably had druid stamped on his dog tags too. This entity had attacked their patrol and devoured their comrades. Getting back to the entity's name, Bazoo, while researching for this episode, that name caught my attention. It brings to mind pop culture. Pazuzu is the name of the demon in the 1973 horror film The Exorcist. This similarity, though possibly coincidental, adds a layer of horror context to the story. This has a strange parallel to the 1973 film The Exorcist. In the film, a girl becomes possessed after using a Ouija board, very similar to the story we just heard. A strange coincidence, but worth mentioning. Could those young Marines have been trying to emulate the movie and accidentally made it real? The Exorcist originated from the novel of the same name, and that novel was inspired by a true story of demonic possession that occurred in 1949. The Force Publique soldiers fell into an ambush by hostile mercenaries while en route to confront the Arab slave traders. The victim was a 13-year-old boy. The cause was believed to be the boy's possession after playing with a Ouija board. The author of the novel, William Peter Blatty, extensively researched the journals of the priest involved in that case. And Blatty's conclusion was that he believed demonic possession was real. A chilling detail from the 1949 case, that boy also developed strange red scratches on his skin, exactly like what happened to Corporal Alpha in the 4th story. Blatty himself also played with a Ouija board while writing the novel. After about 10 days, strange things started happening in his house, similar to what happened to the Marines. For example, phones falling off the hook when a call came in, or the typewriter automatically typing out gibberish. So would I try messing with a Ouija board? Absolutely not. The patrol suffered heavy casualties in the ambush. It's like my view on most of these stories, why take the risk? I am a person of faith, and there is only one spirit that I want to know personally, and he does not communicate through Ouija boards. I'm not going to tell the Marines listening that they shouldn't use Ouija boards, because telling a Marine not to do something guarantees they will do it. It's like the weekend safety brief in the Marine Corps. That brief is repeated exactly the same every Friday afternoon, and for good reason. The core points. Don't increase the population. Commit crimes, get pregnant. Don't decrease the population, die. Stay out of the hospital, the newspaper, and jail. Now maybe they should add don't summon demons into the barracks. I suspect that the standing order at Camp Lejeune didn't do much good other than pique curiosity and make more Marines want to learn about Ouija boards and demons. The first BTR was hit directly instantly. In just seconds, half of Cap's platoon was burned to death on the spot, with temperatures reaching hundreds of degrees Celsius. It was a horrific, unforgettable sight. The commanding officer ordered a retreat deep into the jungle to shake off their pursuers. There are plenty of other ways to kill time. For example, I'm really enjoying the Korean anime Solo Leveling, though it's a bit gory. Stay safe out there, folks. Thanks for sticking around for the crew credits, aka the after action report. Recent episodes have been a bit more free-form, allowing me to share personal thoughts as I tell the stories. In this outro, I'll share the stories my younger brother shared from working at the hospital. The first story from my brother, an incident involving a patient and a small boy. The setting was the nurse's station late one night early morning. There were a couple of nurses on duty and a female patient. This patient reported that she had just come out of the women's restroom and saw a small boy. They succeeded in breaking contact with the enemy. She stepped out of the stall and saw the child standing by the sink. She was startled because she hadn't heard anyone come in and wasn't expecting to see anyone there. She wanted to help because the child looked lost or confused. She tried to ask the child his name, but he wouldn't talk to her. The patient then went to the nurse's station to report the incident. The nurses immediately got up to check. Initially, they thought that one of the children had climbed out of bed, maybe pulled out an IV line. They checked in the restroom, but no one was there. Next thought, the child was wandering around the hospital. They were concerned the child might have gotten into an elevator and was on another floor. However, the unit became completely lost in the unfamiliar forest. They decided to check the security cameras to track the child. What baffled them, from the time the woman exited the restroom until the nurses entered the camera, did not record anyone leaving the restroom. The second story from my brother, the permanently closed room. It was a room in the hospital, not sure if on the same floor or a different one. The reason this room was permanently closed was because too many patients complained over time. The content of the complaints: they were woken up in the middle of the night and saw a child run through their room. More chillingly, in some cases, that child ran through the walls. The third story from my brother, his own personal experience. The setting one night on duty. For days they wandered aimlessly in the heart of the jungle. The patients were sick children, cancer chemo, etc. Specifically, a small girl sleeping in her bed. My brother's task was to administer medication into her IV line. He tried his best not to wake the girl up so she could get her rest. He was sitting very close to the girl's bed on a rolling stool. Then he felt a distinct pressure on his left knee. It felt as if a small child's hand had just been placed on his knee. My brother's immediate reaction: he pushed himself and the stool back away from the girl's bed. He thought someone was hiding under the bed, but the truth was no one was there. Many of the wounded succumbed to infection and heat stroke due to the high humidity. Simultaneously, at the exact moment he pushed the stool back, the automatic soap dispenser activated. It was mounted on the wall behind him. It was the kind that uses an infrared sensor. I'm guessing it activated as if something invisible had just passed by. The sequence of events: felt his knee touched, pushed the stool back, heard the soap dispenser activate. My assessment of my brother's credibility: he's my brother. I've never heard him tell anything about ghosts before. He's not the type of person who has a new story every week to tell. This is the first and only time he's shared anything like this. The remaining men continued their journey, hoping to find their way back to Camp River Trail. So it's hard not to believe him, since I've lived with him, and know he's not someone who makes things up. One afternoon, while resting, the forest around them suddenly fell eerily silent. Giant spiders emerged from beneath the undergrowth. They had bodies the size of large dogs and leg spans up to 5 feet wide. These creatures swarmed surrounding the soldiers, who were frozen with fear. Cap yelled orders to the driver to perform evasive maneuvers and find an escape route. He understood clearly they weren't John Rambo. They didn't have personal thermal scanners for the entire platoon to identify targets hidden in the trees. Trapped inside the armored vehicle, they were completely blind, unable to see the enemy. They were just sitting ducks under a hail of bullets. the enemy would surely kill them all. His only goal at this point was to try and save at least half of the remaining soldiers. The spiders knocked the men to the ground, plunged their venomous fangs into them, and dragged them away. The victims were dragged into the undergrowth, or up nearby tree trunks, vanishing into the foliage. Panicked gunfire erupted in the forest. The agile spiders easily outpaced the fleeing soldiers, who were often tripped by vines and brush. The officer Jansen witnessed soldiers being seemingly carried off or torn apart by hundreds of giant spiders. In utter terror, the officer Jansen broke formation and fled into the forest. He escaped the direct attack. The screams of his comrades continued to echo, then gradually grew fainter as he stumbled deeper into the woods. Lieutenant Jansen and one other soldier were the only survivors from the company. To the European superior officers, the account of giant spiders was likely just the ravings of two men driven insane